other a public desire to punish criminals. And this is tension between rehabilitation and punishment when dealing with children and adolescents who commit offenses results in ambivalent orientation towards young offenders. Criminal acts must be suppressed, yes, condemned, punished. Nevertheless, children and adolescents who commit offenses must be educated, supported in a growth process. That should be the objective of government policy for all young people, including young offenders. Today we will be engaged in a conversation on a piece of that, the juvenile justice system. And joining us for that conversation in studio is Miss Priscilla Clark. I want to say good morning to her.
Good morning.
And say welcome to Frank and Candid.
Thank you.
All right, it's a Friday. You might be enjoying doing something else, but but you're here, and we have a few minutes to discuss the whole idea of the juvenile justice system. Ms. Clark, let's begin by talking about the juvenile justice. What is juvenile justice?
Certainly. Good morning, Mr. Ness, and to all of your listeners. As indicated, my name is Priscilla Clark. I'm here in capacity as the focal point for a regional project that has been undergoing for at least 10 years now, called the Juvenile Justice Reform Project. It is coordinated by the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS Commission, with funding from USAID. Now, juvenile justice refers to the system of law that deals with juveniles that come in conflict with it. So anything from what we call status offenses of truancy, beyond care and control, to major offenses like murder, assault, and the same. So there is to be a separate system for dealing with juveniles, children under the age of 18. It is felt to be separate because we would want not to have the child's contact with the justice system to scar them and leave them with no opportunities for restoration, restitution, and rehabilitation. Because of many of us, if we were actually to go to the justice system for, stealing the pal when we were small from the tray, or coming home late, then many of us would not be the people that we are today. So we have to understand the developmental minds of juveniles, and understanding that mindset of theirs, then putting in place systems, programs, and processes that holds them accountable for what they've done, offers restitution to the individual or entities offended, but all nonetheless giving them a second chance to still be productive citizens.
You mentioned an upper limit, as in 18. Is there a lower limit to?
Well, criminal responsibility in St. Kitts and Nevis used to be at the age of 8. Okay. That means that at 8, a child can be charged criminally with an act, with convening a law or contravening a law. However, in 2013, with help from the OECS Commission, the region agreed on a new Child Justice Act, which St. Kitts and Nevis was the first to pass, and that now set criminal responsibility to 12.
Okay.
Now, the DPP still has the option to charge a child younger. That's always within his remit. But for all intents and purposes, at age 12, we say that's criminal responsibility.
Okay. As far as the justice or the juvenile justice system, I take it there are a number of agencies involved here.
Correct.
Give me some of those.
Of course, it starts as always with the police because they respond to any incidents of law breaking. Then we have the Department of Probation and Child Protective Services that has an intervention to undertake where certain assessments are undertaken to determine the level of risk factors and social orientations of the young person, the environment, and then we go to the magistrate court, which under the new act there's now a child justice committee that looks at matters involving juveniles. If the DPP so chooses, they can still go to the magistrate level, but there is a diversion option, which is now the Child Justice Committee, which is headed by a magistrate. We have the legislation allows us to set up diversion programs, and diversion, as the name says, is to divert. So instead of going through incarceration or any sort of institutional sanctions, the child can do certain actions in the community to be able to learn new skills, develop talents, give restitution to the victim, and coming to understand fully why they did this, why it's not good. So that is also built into our juvenile justice system. So there are some diversion programs that the legislation permits us to have. We also have the New Horizon Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, which is our main institution for care and custody of persons, juveniles in conflict with the law.
Is there a separate juvenile court?
No, we've not advanced that level yet. I know there's been some studies by the Probation and Child Welfare Board of Trinidad and others that have that set up. So they may be, but at present we do not. We still use the magistrate court.
A lot of times, we hear the terms minor and juvenile. Are they legally the same?
By age definition, yes.
Okay.
By age definition, yes. It's just vernacular that persons prefer.
Why is it that this project that you are involved in, why is it that you think that there is a need for a separate system? You mentioned some of the things that they face when placed in say the general population with hardened criminals. That's one. But what was really the catalyst behind pushing the juvenile?
Well, because the region as a whole has over 65% of its population is considered young as a region. And then when we look at the percentage of crime that was committed at the time by adolescents, juveniles, minors, whatever the vernacular preferred, it was becoming alarming. All right, so we had to do an interjection to say something is happening. You mentioned some of those in your introduction. We have certain societal changes that have brought about new nexus and alliterations of generations. But bottom line is there's an acceptance that until age 25, the adult brain is not yet fully developed. That is an established psychological and psychiatric fact. So what happens before that, one has to apply a different approach to that. So the concept of being housed in facilities with adults, legal and psychological adults, persons with the mental faculty to determine right from wrong and all of its consequences, has negative impacts on juveniles whose brains are still developing. All right, so we had to separate them. So that was New Horizon being built so that you can separate them. Then it's a matter of the justice system has, of course, it's the built-in innocent until proven guilty, but the entire process of being on remand and going through sentencing or adjudication towards sentencing, those can be traumatizing effects for adolescents, juveniles. So it's a matter that says, are we in a position to determine by our legislation some lower level offenses that if a juvenile commits, we will not apprehend? We will caution, we will warn them in the presence of their parents. Good old things that we all used to do. Granny down the road used to warn you, don't let me call your mother. The police, of course, is the authority to do that. So we'll warn in the presence of the parent, and hopefully the parent with some support would be able to take stock and say, okay, you don't have a father. You don't have a strong support system. So let me enroll you in one of these community entities to try to give you greater structure. All right. Then we have, okay, then if there are these offenses that if the child does commit, we have to apprehend, because the schedule says these are things that the community have less propensity to forgive or would need restitution for, then do we put them through the criminal process, or do we allow them to grant restitution, do community service, anger replacement therapy, counseling, come to terms with the things that are within them, the anger, the emotions that they don't yet know how to express, and the self-esteem that they've not developed yet, so that when somebody just tells them, oh, come this way and come with me, they readily go and assent to everything that they say to do. So if we can develop those things, we grant restitution to the community, you do some sort of community service to say, individual, community, or country, I'm sorry, but still being able to get the skill sets to then come out and still be a productive citizen, because we can't really lose any person. We need everybody to be productive, whatever that means for you, economic, social, cultural, whatever that is. We need everybody on deck to make our federation, and by extension our region, better. So those were some of the considerations that went into developing a separate system for juveniles.
Under the juvenile justice system, the juvenile then do they have some of the same basic due process rights, such as legal representation?
Yes. Okay. So the legal aid clinic would assist with that, or families can get their own private lawyers. They do have the right to face their accused. Of course, if it's a juvenile or court system is set up with remote access, so they can see, but the younger victim is not traumatized by being in the physical presence of the individual. So yes, all of the rights enshrined in the justice system are still applicable to the juvenile. Okay.
Now, we are talking a lot about what happens once they run afoul of the law, or they become offenders. As part of this project, is there any priority given to preventative type of activities before they get?
Yes. Through the Juvenile Justice Reform Project, there has been 4 programs that has been established on St. Kitts and Nevis. We have Yes to Success, which is a prevention and diversion program run by the Department of Social Services in Nevis. It has a physical site where children on suspension, parents who self-report children, as well as those who are actually in conflict with the law, would go there and they get a myriad of services: counseling, academic, social, life skills, all the same at a venue that they can feel comfortable in. Then we also had support given by the Juvenile Justice Reform Project to explorers, and explorers is being tagged as an opportunity to reestablish some of those preventative activities that many of us grew up with: 4-H, Girls Brigade, Boys Brigade, Scouts, and the like. So support has been granted to the Explorers group to expand their offerings to young persons. So it would be a diversion as well as what they normally do as an intervention program for young persons. We also have the Department of Youth's mentorship program that has also been supported, and there is a group called ALCAS. The acronym right now, it's very long, but Mr. Stuart Vasales and others are involved, and they'll be doing some mulching and woodworking activities for juveniles in conflict with the law, and they do other programs for general population. So it's an opportunity to provide avenues for individuals that are interested in lending a hand, being a part of the solution, to come on board and offer those services and programs to the ministry, so that juveniles can be put in contact at any stage. So from the time the mother says, my son is getting a little out of hand, do you have anything for me to get him going? That list is required as much as the list that the court will demand when they have to, court or the Child Justice Committee would refer to be able to make up the child's sentence in parentheses.
Yeah. I know when we talk about the juvenile justice and the juvenile justice system, we are defining these people by an age group. However, is there anything within this system that differentiates between a youth that's actually involved in crime and we would say far gone, and one that is at risk of delinquency then.
Right. Another great component of the new legislation is that it calls for assessment.
Okay.
Because for too long we focus on the crime and not the circumstances or the individual. I'll take the most egregious one. When you hear of murder, it's like the worst thing. Of course it is the worst thing. It's a loss of life.
Yeah.
However, when we look at some of the circumstances, was it a result of bullying? Does this person continually express a desire for assistance that was not provided readily, and in the next interaction with the person, there became an altercation and then there was a death? So an assessment allows you to take a comprehensive view, because while certain infractions are scheduled differently, murder is a Schedule 3 offense, you are able to do a risk assessment of the individual to be able to say, though the offense is Schedule 3, the individual themselves is low risk, because they don't have certain propensities for anger, aggression, they empathize, they can reason right from wrong as circumstances occurred that brought about a result. And therefore you program based on that risk factor. So there's a strong possibility that the child who is a frequent flyer in our delinquency situation may actually be low risk. They may not have any self-esteem, no self-actualization, no support system, so are easily amenable to persons putting them in that thing, because then they get fame and they get likes and they get popularity. But then you may have a child who steals a sweet and just has no construct, or breaks into a person's house and has no construct of the harm that they've created. And so that person, from a psychological standpoint, may have a different risk assessment score than the individual who, by all accounts, is at a different stage in personal and self-development. So that allows us to dig deeper than just say, okay, all murders, life sentence, death sentence, whatever, incarcerations. Petty crimes, we're letting go of all. No, it allows you to put an entire umbrella over the situation and look at each component.
Gotcha. Let me pause here quickly to say to our listening audience that if you have a question for my guests, feel free to call us. 465-2555 is the local number, and 718-577-2916 if you have a question for Ms. Clark regarding the subject we are on this morning. Juvenile justice system. You have a goal in mind, an overall goal in mind. Yes. Why you put this, involved in all of this. Talk to me about that.
Yes, it is to be able to provide I think you have a call. You have a call already.
You have a call? Okay. Hold that thought.
Yes.
Let's take the call and let's say good morning. Welcome to Frank and Candid.
Good morning. Sorry for taking your program a little off its course, but there is something of concern and an issue I want to raise in the Navy. That I'm calling on the non-government organizations, the churches, unions, and concerned citizens to appeal to traffic and government that we're going to policy in this country to make our roads safer. Things are seriously getting out of hand on the roads, and pedestrian lives are getting in danger. There is something that many of us drivers don't seem to understand. That at one point everybody is a pedestrian, and some of us, because we are driving, tend to think that the people on foot are inferior beings. And I'm calling on all those organizations and governments to please put a handle and get a handle on this recklessness on our road. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's the topic we'll deal with another day, but let's take the next call. Good morning, welcome.
Greetings in the name of our great African ancestors, especially the most honorable Marcus Masai Garvey and Queen Anzing. Blessed morning, my beloved young sister and my beloved brother dear.
Good morning.
Now I have a couple comments. You know, you said, Sister Clark, that I'm not blaming you, my beloved sister. How can any civilized society charge of 12-year-old? They just backward, primitive, make no sense whatsoever. If it's a 16 years old, I understand that, beloved. It makes no sense. How can, you see, we adopt this new colonialist system and it still continues to this day. We must develop a thing coming from us African people. Rites of passage, counseling for our young people, therapy. Not this just go wantonly and just indict a 12-year-old. It makes no sense. That's barbarism to the core. And like I said, we must develop a thing coming from our own people, African people, who have our children and our people at heart. Not this nonsensical 12 years old. Come on. Makes no sense. Absolutely make no sense whatsoever. So I hope visionary people go and revisit that and change it to 16 years old. And again, when you gonna put our leg, Brother Niall say, you cannot put our children among hardened criminals. They're gonna come. Most of them will turn out to be even worse than when they enter there. And while there's life, there's hope. I'm gonna close now. Just go, Malcolm X, Minister Malcolm X. Man, he was a vicious thing in his youthful days, and that brother changed to become one of our greatest leaders. So there's hope for our children, and we mustn't write off any of our children. No one of them. No one is too bad to be reformed, my beloved sister and brother. So we must change that mentality, and we must bring an African-centered thing to our children, not no Eurocentric crap. But I continue to listen, and I hope the authorities go and revisit that expeditiously and do the right thing. Pan-Africanism our purpose. One love, my beloved sister and brother. Continue to listen.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clark, want to respond to any of that?
Sure. Yes. As a social worker, would it be my ideal that we charge no juvenile, recognizing that they don't get an adult brain until the age of 25? Yes, that would be the ideal. Mm-hmm. However, change takes time. As I said, it started with 8. Mm-hmm. Many people in St. Kitts and Nevis were not even aware that an 8-year-old could have been charged with capital offenses. And then it moved to 12. Okay. So hopefully within my life, we would see it where we use best practice, whether it's our cultural African or development studies of the human brain and behavior, to understand that happens, but with the wraparound services as well. Psychiatry will tell you that it is actually possible for certain mental illnesses to start as early as 8 to 12, because when the body starts to undergo the additional hormonal changes without supports and other things, the multiplicity of issues that can happen in the brain, left, right, crossing signals can occur. So there is possibility to get a sociopath at 10. Mm-hmm. Heaven forbid we never. But there is possibility. So again, the system allows you to take age and development into play as a duality, as opposed to just saying 8, you could go. No, 8, but if you think like a 6-year-old, we'll take into consideration. But if you think like a 15-year-old, we'll take that into consideration as well. I think you have another call.
Let's take this call. Good morning. Welcome to Frank and Candid. Good morning, caller. Okay, we lost that caller. Good morning.
Chico?
Good morning, caller. You're live on Frank and Candid.
Oh, no.
Okay. All right.
And as for the separate, yes, that's why the New Horizons Juvenile Rehabilitation Center was founded, because UNICEF, Riyadh International Convention said you should not be housing adolescents with adults. And we're not even talking in the same facility, like different wings, and one understands the complexities that is HMP with physical space. So that's why the center was established. So we're moving slowly but surely into the way of inflicting as little pain and trauma on our juveniles when they do go astray.
Give me again some of those options that a judge may have.
Sure. Even at the point of apprehension, the police has discretion what charges to take possession of the juvenile and what to just simply warn and release to the care of their parents. So that's one level. Then once the determination is made to pursue charges against the juvenile, the DPP has the choice to say, no, I'm not gonna pursue charges, send them to the defer them to the Child Justice Committee, which will handle matters of diversion, rehabilitation, and some of those psychosocial supports. Then if the child is adjudicated and has that, even within the prison system, there is a requirement for rehabilitation. Because again, we don't have life sentences for juveniles. So they will be released at some point. So we have to still provide those wraparound services for the individuals.
What are some of the challenges that this juvenile system project itself encountering?
Well, at every stage, I mean, as you mentioned in your opening, we do have significant social challenges. There is, as a parent now, I understand the vehemence of defending your child against it all. But I think we also must have an understanding of when we need help. And acknowledging help, acknowledging the need for help, is a powerful something to be celebrated, not to be called down upon. As also a social worker in the psychosocial field. So to ask for help should not be something that we call down a parent for. It should be something we celebrate them for. Because as the gentleman said, if some of our social values still are, the community raises a child, every child belongs to all of us, then we still must have those responsiveness. So at a parental level, there needs to be the acknowledgement of when help is needed. Then as a society, we need to provide multiple layers of help. Church, godparents, family, friends, good tiding individuals in the community. Trust me, I've heard the stories of persons who have given of themselves and have been taken to the ringer, and I've had nothing good to say and done for them. But if that person isn't able to, then may we continually raise individuals that have that sense of giving back. All right. Now we never lose that. So your generation may have been taken advantage of. My generation should not just hear my father say, "Well, don't do anything good for people and don't do it," but should be raised with the values to do the same. And it should happen at every level. Then, of course, in our ministry, I serve as the Director of Policy Planning and Projects. So at a policy level, we need to ensure that the state provides services at every level. We are coming around to the psychosocial supports, or counseling psychologists and the like are building up in their response to national issues. Finances, of course, there are persons with complex issues that require multiple stages of responses, physically removing them, placing them in places of safety, providing employment or stopgap assistance while certain issues occur. And then, of course, providing institutions as a last resort, as an absolute last resort. But I see that you may have another caller.
Okay, let's take the call. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Nayas, and good morning to your host. We're speaking about young people, but we are not getting to the bottom of what causing the young people to be behaving how they are behaving. It is a repercussion of what the elders are doing. Let's take for example, right? Back in 1975, the 1st of December, our parents went and voted for the person who was in charge of the country back then to buy our sugar lands. The young children was not able to vote. But who giving the authorities, the authorization to sell these lands. What is now going on is what took place from we the elders and the young people looking and learning from what took place. It's like, I like to let the lady who, because for example, right, the young people, for example, look at it. The Spanish them coming on here and living a kind of life, and the young teenage girls getting involved in it too, and they are not eligible to vote. Nothing is put in place to prevent what's going on. So the young children, them now, like they're inheriting these things here. It's like become a norm to them. Mr. Nyas, we are, you and I know, when we were young as a teenagers, this thing was not going on. The whole thing is that the politicians trying on a culture on the young children. When we was young, there was no burglar bars, the windows were still open and all these things. How is it now that it's a shame to see Brother Bob Marley sing a song, you know, the generation gap. And if we don't understand what he means by that, the young children will suffer because we did not transfer what we learned from our parents. The politicians are to blame. And I would say, speaking of from the very first Prime Minister, the second Prime Minister, and the present Prime Minister, they did not take up this stance to say, well, take the country forward. Because if we take the country forward, is pulling the young children. The young children live and learn. You live what they learn and learn what they live. And that is what we're seeing. It's like we're looking in a mirror and we have to blame ourselves. We cannot blame the young children. How is it they could get up and sell land without our consent?
Okay. All right.
I'm going to listen to your response from you all.
Is that it? We got a call on? Okay. All right. Did you want to respond to any of that?
Exploring root causes, and anybody that physically can envision a tree, the root is as multiple. It's not the one stalk you see coming out of the earth does not reflect the singularity of what's going on the ground. Mm-hmm. So the caller has chosen to focus on one end. What I can say as a social worker is that yes, I find, and this is Azella Clark speaking, that throughout our generations, we've not focused sufficiently on the social fabric of what makes us a Kitishan. Mm-hmm. All right? I'm raising a son, and I struggle. Well, I know what I'll tell him, but for this conversation, I struggle to define for him what is a Kitishan. So when he goes anywhere in the world, he will know what it is to be who he is. Mm-hmm. All right? Then, when he interacts with Vincentians, Bajans, Jamaicans, and they sprinkle a little bit of their flavor with him, he will have a base to know what is a Kitishan. Some of the challenges he mentions with the mixing of various cultures has to do with a little bit of that. Our laws say what should be occurring, and if we know that a certain profession that may be greater represented in one of our immigrant or returning national population, let me say that because we left to go to Dominican Republic and now they're coming back for their stake in the country. If a certain profession is more represented empirically or by social constructs and knowledge, we know, amongst that population, and you're saying it has an impact on what we are, but that's not being who we are, then we're not telling our young girls that's not who we are. Mm-hmm. We do not use our bodies for that purpose. You know, if we're Christians, we know what we use our bodies for. Mm-hmm. So that has to be a foundation that I really hope before we get to 50 years of independence, that we will change and raise up more of that social fabric. Every parent should be telling a child what it means to be Kitishan. Okay? And even if it's just taking the word Kitishan and finding a word that ties to everything, that encapsulate who we are, that would be appropriate. But so he's chosen the politicians as one of the root causes. Many persons start with parents because they have a fundamental role. Then as a social worker, we say micro, meso, macro. So the micro is me. As a child, I don't yet have certain rights, so they are passed on to my parent to give that to me. But parents is not singular. They're two individuals, then they are godparents, and then there's everybody else in your family. And it raises certain issues about family structures in St. Kitts and Nevis. Then we go on to the institutions that make us who we are: school, church, social engagements. And then we multiply those throughout your years, whether it's all up to university, grad school, if it's all up to full service in the church, or just simply paying your tithes every Sunday. And the social engagements, how many of those you acquire or are truly committed to throughout your years, and you make it a fabric of your engagement and service to the country. So root causes, we've gotten some explorations on all. Unfortunately, we are not very good at being a research-based community, and that's on the individuals, because we don't even regularly participate in our census. We're asking too many questions, which I don't frankly understand. But if we engender a research base where at certain key points in everybody's development, you are asked to answer certain questions. When you leave, when you enter primary school, you're speaking, so you should be able to say, what was your greatest memory or least memory of preschool? And that would help to create a better structure in preschool. Then when you leave primary school, when you leave secondary school, and you leave throughout all things, if we even just get an exit survey as a condition of our lives, that would be able to engender some. So I hear the concern, but we have to understand that until you're 18 and legally an adult, you do not have as much rights. They are given to you by adults. Right. And if we keep that in mind, then we have to be cognizant of every interaction and approach to that population.
Okay. Let's go back to the phones. Good morning. Welcome to Frank and Candid.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning to Miss Clark.
Good morning.
Miss Clark stated that we are Christians. Don't you think that is because we pull the Christian principles out of the schools and elsewhere, even in the workplaces? Don't you think that contribute to the behavior of our young children today? Because as I grew up, as Zilla stated earlier, we all had hard times. But what makes somebody click or tick? Isn't it part of the brain that the things that register in the brain is like, as when we was going to girls' school, you know, every Tuesday and Thursday, I think we used to go to either Methodist or Anglican church. So we was bombarded with the spiritual aspect of life. So I think that, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that some of our parents is to be blamed because we pull away the spiritual aspect of life, and then we bombard our children with worldly stuff. We ain't gonna buy a good pants to send them to church, but we ain't buy expensive pants for them to go in town and jam and tear up and go on. So I'm here listening to the topic, and it's, you know, we have to balance it out. And as I grow older in this world, and it's everything mental, we have to learn to take responsibility for our actions. You know, so I wanted to know if some people could take hash treatment and don't go crazy, quote unquote, as they call it, or it's just a function of the brain. I'm listening. I need to be educated.
Okay. All right.
Yes, the church has a role to play. I'm not, from my knowledge of what happens in the schools, there's actually like school pastors attached. They still have assembly. In the workplace, it's always been a personal choice. I mean, if you want to spend the first couple of minutes in silent prayer, your employer cannot, by the Constitution, say anything to you. Right. But as to say it's a practice that everything shuts down and you have morning devotions, I'm not familiar with that in the workplace, but it comes on to individual observance of the same. Right. But yes, overall there has been challenges. The churches will tell you the pews are not as filled. The laborers are few and stuff like that. So there's always been a challenge, but remember that your faith is a personal reflection. And once we strengthen some of that, then we may be able to get the outward manifestations. That was church. The quote-unquote not about, oh God, that could go down an entirely different thing. Yes, the human brain is an amazing organ. And its propensity to process things. Now, every processing is not the same type of processing. I'm an introvert, so my processing is intellectual and is compiled. Some is just we call it like fugue, where you put it in a box and you leave it there. And there are some who are able to pack away certain experiences and situations, because if they unpack it, it would stir too much in them. And your brain knows when something is beyond your capacity. All right? It will shut you down. You would cry, you would sleep, you may have a mental breakdown, but your brain has its own triggers. So it is some degree of reflection of that, and that's why building up the person in their entirety, coping mechanisms, understanding your boundaries, saying no is not a bad word, saying no, self-care, coming out of COVID, the focus on self-care is a social worker's dream, that people will actually take vacation and just take off the phone, or choose when you access the phone. Some of us can't actually turn it off, but you choose the hour between 11 and 12. I'm gonna catch up on every email and then I'm done. Right. Choose. Disconnect from social media, telephone. Good. We live on an island. Go on the beach. Fall up with your best book. So for me, I'm hoping that self-care becomes that. When you feel sick, you don't have life. Yes, everybody has bills at the end of the month. That first pays. So you have that economic responsibility, but you also know that if I am not well, I can't perform well. So if it's 3 days to get over a cold, where life permits you, I mean, if you have children running around and all the responsibilities, you may not be able to take a full decompression, but as much of a decompression as you can get. So those are some considerations as well. And while we're on the topic of brain development, that is why we're asking for special consideration for juveniles. Right. Because, as I said, if every time we stole the pal and the sugar cake, especially from Miss Janet Allen in Irish Town, I was sent to the I probably won't be here today. Right. Or if that stigma stayed with me all the time. Oh, Tiffany, I lost you, Steve, Miss Janet, but it was really good. Really, really good sugar cake. Yeah. So, and if that stigma followed me all the days of my life, I probably wouldn't be the person I am today. But somebody just said, and then I had a stern grandmother who really knocked it out of me. So, yeah.
I want to ask you about where we are in terms of a legislative process in support of.
Yes, the Child Justice Act is the principal legislation that speaks to our interaction with juveniles. It repealed our Juvenile Justice Act, which I said set the age at 8, didn't allow for clinical assessment, had nothing about diversion, had nothing about separate but equal. So this legislation puts a framework in place that allows for every partner in the juvenile justice system, from the police. They now not just have the responsibility to apprehend for punishment, but to also, like we all knew police officers used to do that, used to talk to you and deter you with just words, allows some of that to come back up. So when you have commitments in national security, such as community policing initiatives, so those police officers, as well as everybody in the rank and file, plays a central role in that intervention. As the Ministry of National Security acknowledged through its establishment that we need a softer approach to these things, as opposed, because we're seeing too many of them come through that.
Do we still have truancy officers?
Yes, in the Ministry of Education is responsible for truancy, and they do have school attendance officers. Now, is it as much as the system requires? Probably not. But yes, that provision still exists in our Education Act.
The juvenile justice system, as you see it, as you envisage, does it involve a lot of coordination, support, efforts of these community-based groups, partnerships with social services and all that?
Yeah, it has a lot of moving parts. Through the Juvenile Justice Reform Project, there is a national coordinating body that had inputs from all these agencies to do so. It is our hope that with the project coming to a close by mid of this year, that we see the need to still maintain an interministerial approach where police, through data and experience of the police force, will be able to tell us how is it going on that front end. How is explorers seeing an inundation of persons from what community, so you can have additional approaches put in place. The Child Justice Committee, the DPP, will be able to say, listen, I'm seeing quite a lot of these things and I'm concerned. about an increased level of this. It doesn't rise to the level of being prosecuted yet. I'm still in favor of diversion, but maybe the next one might be so grave that I have to. So there's any way that we can make some interjections there. And so all the players in the system must coordinate. And there's a role for the public. As I indicated, the Act allows for intervention and diversion programs to be registered to the Department of Probation and Child Protective Services. And I'm sure in short order there'll be a call to the ministry for persons to volunteer. Stuff like mentorship. The Child Justice Act allows for mentors to be assigned to individuals. Once upon a time you just chose a person. In this day and age, that's not as easy, and it's not actually from a government entity assigning an individual. You have to do much greater due diligence because of the influence that person can have on the young person. It could actually supersede that of its parent. So we have to do a lot of due diligence in examining the applicants and making sure that they have the reputation, the criminal record, and they are psychologically sound to be able to render that service. Because mentoring is about you.
It would seem to me that in this juvenile justice system, and we mentioned that the police is a part of that, but I'm wondering though, is there specific training for police? Because dealing with young people can be tough.
Yes.
Especially, for me who am not into that profession, but for a police officer who has to be on the beat and come in contact with this age group, juveniles, what kind of training do they have?
Yes. Under the Juvenile Justice Reform Project in 2018, there was an opportunity for 100 officers, police, prison, Coast Guard, to receive training in juvenile justice.
Okay.
Understanding the brain, the pull and push factors that lead juveniles there, taking a look at the system as it is and what their thoughts are, and then understanding what the legislation actually says should be occurring. And so now the provisions are being made for that curriculum to be a standard in the police training, and to also have refresher with existing officers. So we've already been having discussions with the High Command of the police to be able to put that in place.
Do they have a unit in the forces, or just
no, every officer.
Every officer.
Yeah. So you go through the police training school where every recruit gets training, and then we do refresher possibly by stations or zones. So pull everybody out together to be able to do refresher, because I don't envy them that. Every piece of legislation has a point to the police or apprehension of some sort. But not every police officer is familiar with what the legislation says it's their role. So when it comes to juveniles, domestic violence, the mentally ill, and any other disadvantaged or vulnerable population, the ministry has a responsibility to meet with our partners and be like, give us an opportunity to bring them together. Because there have been persons in the force who live through the upswing of juveniles and just have no patience for them. Collar you up and come with me.
Yeah, I know.
The good old school, like, God. Yeah. But we're saying, well, just scoop the collar, don't grab the collar. Because
you talk about that. When I was growing up, and speaking of community policing, we had community policing.
Yeah, because, it wasn't called that because we just did it.
It wasn't called that. But if I was on the street, a police would know that is that is Mary's son, and tell Mary, talk to him, or when you grab him, or when you hold on to him, you say, well, look, you take him to his parents, and you walk it out, and you're good again, right? You come away from those ways, but we kind of move away from that a lot. Yeah,
correct. It's as I oftentimes tell the story that when I returned home from university in 2017, it was a shock to me to find out how vehement parents were in their defense of their children, to the detriment of the rest of the supporting factors. So a teacher, that incidents of people hitting teachers, I've never met. There's instances, the same thing, like when an officer has to come in, don't talk to me. I'm like, how do you tell an officer? Okay, then I'm going to wait for him to get to the point where you can't tell me what to do with him, because it's obvious I can scoop him up and just carry him. Neighbors, just, get out the road, don't talk to me. Like, I'm confused. What do you want me to do? Like, scoop him up when he gets hit by the next car. No, there's some of us who are a little bit, can go continue in the interaction and speak to the parents and be like, but that's not what we are saying. But then the rest of the community will be, oh no, she wants to leave her child alone, she'll leave her child alone. So when I see the child, like the shift system we've had as a result of COVID, when the child should be coming home at 12 and I see the child diverting, going somewhere else because I'm home on leave, not a word out my mouth. And it's like, but you do understand that, if that results in a rape, a sexual assault, a pregnancy, some other sort of assault, murder, disappearance, that's quite a bit of guilt.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So, and we have situations like that have played out in our society now. So, we still encourage persons to be there for individuals and young persons. We could be as an individual or through systems, still offering, what the caller mentioned, Sunday school, and a myriad of them that many of us attended on a Sunday, from Thursday to a Sunday, after school activities, or even community-based things, like, when you see kids around, you just, come over, or you hand them a paper and say, try that until your mom reaches home. They maybe still continue to be invested.
The future. What do you see the future for this project?
Yes. It is to ensure that at the individual level, persons in St. Kitts and Nevis understands the change in approach to juvenile justice. So it is not sufficient for us to be able to just tell those who come in conflict with the system that have a second chance, but it's also that every person know, because they're potentially either a victim or a perpetrator or witness perhaps, that there is this change that is undergoing. And we would want each of the entities in the system, as named earlier, to be able to receive all of the resources, human, technical, and of course financial, to continue to evolve. Because juvenile justice is not just stuck in one area. All right. We've seen the evolution from simple back in the days of hand-to-hand combat to using leased weapons, hammers, machetes and stuff, to now the extreme of guns, which can inflict the greatest amount of pain from certain distances. Once upon a time, to inflict pain had to be up in your face. Now it can be at a distance and inflict the greatest pain. And so even if we roll it back, to go into hand-to-hand combat, we shouldn't be taken as far back as we were when the gun violence occurred, to be responsive to the situation.
All right. Any last thought you want to leave us audience with? Encouragement or
yes. Just remember that we were all young at one point, and we needed a second chance. We needed somebody to stand for us, and we're hoping that we continue to engender that. The Juvenile Justice Reform Project, as financed by the OECS Commission, comes to a close after 10 years in the Federation, in mid of this year, I think July of this year. But we hope that you, the general public, will hold us in management and technical areas accountable for ensuring that the gains continue. As the gentleman says, he expects us to one day move the age to 16. I'm a hold for that one. But continue to have expectations of the individuals and entities in the system to do right by one of the most vulnerable in our population, our children.
All right, and Ms. Clark, I want to thank you for all that information you provided for us today. I mean, time was short, because
yes.
It's over. Thank you again for coming in and giving us that information. We probably have to do this again sometime.
No problem.
Because there's probably a lot more we can touch, and we would like to keep updated as to how we're doing as far as this project is concerned and juvenile justice overall. Thank you. My name is Tony Ness, and again, thank you all for joining me here on Frank and Candid as per usual. Today is Friday. It's the end of the week. We will be back on Monday if it is to be, with much more conversation right here on Frank and Candid.